This is the biggest podcast I've ever done in my career. Welcome back to the Byron podcast. I had the pleasure and honor of interviewing Spencer Rascoff, the former CEO of Zillow of 14 years. He invited us into his home. We went deep on his 14 years at Zillow. I asked him the question that is on everybody's mind. Spencer, would you, if you were the current CEO of Zillow, start to buy independent brokerages across the country? We know Zillow is already licensed in every single state. So is that the next move? Spencer reveals that secret and much more on his 14 years there. We talk about Pacaso. We talk about what every real estate entrepreneur should be thinking about. Spencer, of course, is the biggest angel investor in the space. He solved big problems in our industry. Another company solving big issues in real estate today is Sisu, S-I-S-U. Sisu increases annual volume for teams in independent brokerages by 107% and individual agent volume by 28%. They are streamlining the transaction side of the business. We use Sisu at my team in Connecticut, which will do over 1,000 transactions this year. The leaderboards and everything that you might have thought Sisu is known for are fantastic, but it's really about automating that transaction side of the business. No more double entry. Take all the stress out of your business and go get Sisu. The link's in the description here. Hope you enjoy the Spencer Rascoff podcast. It's my favorite ever. Unbelievable way to end the BAM launch week. Sitting here with Spencer Rascoff. Needs no introduction. Former CEO of Zillow. 75 and Sunny is your investment company, as well as obviously Pacaso, which is the fastest unicorn status company of all time. Did I say that right? Is that the?
You did.
All
yes.
Right. So we want to get all into that.
Great.
Before, you've done so much, and it's impossible to even start running through all of the companies that you've had an influence on. But the biggest influence you have is just the kingpin of residential real estate. I mean, you are the matchmaker. If anybody wants to pitch a deal, they're trying to get on your calendar. Right? Am I right?
I have a lot of Proptech deals, yes. Yeah. Because of my Zillow experience and now my Pacaso experience, I tend to see a lot of deals in Proptech. And last year, 75 and Sunny did about 100. We have about 100 companies in our portfolio. We did about 50 new deals last year, and about a quarter of them are in Proptech.
Yeah. I mean, this is unbelievable for us. Like being able to sit here with you and make the time. Super grateful.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, very thankful. So just real quick, why don't you give us the background of you getting to that point of being able to have the influence you have in the industry?
Sure. So I started my career, well, actually I should back up. My mom was a real estate agent.
Yeah.
So I grew up in and around real estate. We used to go to open houses for fun as a kid. I still drag my kids to open houses for fun. I'm not sure they think it's as much fun as I do, but that's okay. Anyway, so kind of grew up in and around real estate. And then my first job out of college was investment banking at Goldman Sachs. So not really tech focused, but investment banking, mergers and acquisitions. Didn't really like it. Moved to San Francisco, worked at a private equity firm called TPG. And then I did my first startup in 1999. It was a company called Hotwire, which is an early online travel company. We sold Hotwire to Expedia in 2003. And then I moved up to Seattle. I worked at Expedia for a year or two, and then I left Expedia to start Zillow. We started Zillow in 2006. I was the CEO that took it public in 2011. We did 17 acquisitions while I was CEO, and it became a very big company, a couple thousand employees, tens of billions of market cap. And then about 3 years ago, I retired as CEO of Zillow. I moved back to LA where I grew up. I started 75 and Sunny, and I've been actively angel investing and starting new companies, including Pacaso, for the last 3 years.
Yeah, definitely want to dive into Pacaso, but we got to start with Zillow.
Great.
And there's a lot of agents that are tuning. You don't do a lot of these, by the way. A lot of interviews. I mean, I see on CNBC you've got your own podcast. .la. You should check out Spencer's podcast. It's unbelievable. But I don't see you do a lot of these where you reflect on the Zillow years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be proud of. It was an amazing and exhausting 13-year run, I think, something like that. And I'm incredibly proud of, first of all, the team that we built, the corporate culture that we created. It was a really special place to work, and we had very, very high levels of employee engagement. And I'm always, I mean, that to me is the thing I'm most proud of was the culture and the people that I recruited and the team and the culture that we created. So that's number one. Number two, I'm proud of the innovations that we brought to the industry, sometimes loudly and over objections. But I think the world is a better place. I think that the U.S. real estate consumer and professional are now smarter. They're more informed. The information asymmetry between the real estate professional and the consumer has been remedied, so consumers are more empowered than ever before, and I'm very proud of that as well.
100%. I will admit, I was one of the agents early in my sales career. I started in 2012, but I would say all the way probably until meeting you. You don't remember this, but I met you in 2015, I believe. It was an Inman. You guys used to do the after parties at the NASDAQ. And in the beginning, I had no money. So I was literally, just doing deals, however I could get them, calls and letters and door knocking and all these kind of things. And I wasn't
scrappy.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. I wasn't buying Zillow leads. And I think that a lot of agents that were undereducated on what Zillow is doing, like I was, Zillow's trying to destroy the agent, all these kind of things. You dealt with so much of that. You explained it to me. You articulated it beautifully to me in the NASDAQ building in 2015 when I got to shake your hand and meet you. And I'm thankful for that because I started to see it through the lens of the consumer as opposed to the lens of the agent and the realtor.
Yeah.
You changed the game and gave the consumers what they didn't have, which was access. But how did you stay, in that lane of being able to compete with all these agents that you were not compete with them, but really, stay in your lane of what you were building while you were working with these agents at the same time?
Well, a lot of real estate agents make a lot of money through Zillow. I mean, that's what's sort of people forget when they talk about opposition that Zillow has faced or is facing or will face in the industry is at the end of the day, agents spend about $1 billion a year with Zillow. So they don't all hate it. Clearly, they're voting with their wallet and they give more money. They're buying more media and getting more software from Zillow than any other company by far in the real estate industry. So clearly a lot of people get a lot of professionals get a lot of value from it, or else they wouldn't work with them the way they do. Right. But that having been said, it has leveled the playing field in terms of information. And there is a type of real estate professional that remembers that is nostalgic about a time when only they had access to the information. Only they.
Still today, which is surprising.
And you know what? Those days are over. Get with the program. Like, imagine you as a consumer, if you didn't have access to the same information as a doctor,
right,
that would piss you off, and the internet has given you the same information as a doctor. Now you still need a professional, a doctor, to help you interpret all this information. So it's great that health information is widely distributed because of the internet, but there's still a role for the practitioner. Real estate's the same way. There's tons of real estate information out there on Zillow and elsewhere, and that's great, but there's still an important role for the practitioner to help you interpret it and to help you with the transaction. And once you start thinking about it that way, as a real estate practitioner, a real estate professional, I think you start to better understand how you still have a role and how you fit into the ecosystem, but that doesn't take anything away from the important role that Zillow plays.
Yeah, and when you start to learn that, you don't come from a place of fear. Obviously, that maybe first third of the transaction, given access to consumers, was an overwhelming good thing for consumers and for the industry. The middle part of the transaction, which is, transaction management, these kind of things, you get. Mm-hmm. When you were at Zillow, you bought .loop, or was it after? It was during your time.
That was me. Yeah.
So you purchased .loop. That would be in that middle of the transaction, putting the deal together. Do you think that part's been solved? Are we still working on the middle? Obviously, the end of the transaction, we can get the title, and those kind of things are still a complete mess.
I mean, there's still, and this is the focus of a lot of my personal investing through 75 and Sunny. There, for a category as big as real estate, with almost $2 trillion of transaction volume a year, just on the resi side, $100 billion of commissions a year. I mean, it is still really antiquated, and transaction management is still a mess. Lead conversion and CRM is still a mess. As you point out, at the very bottom of the funnel, all the attached services still haven't been digitized. So buying and selling a home still looks mostly like it looked 15 years ago when we started Zillow. except for iBuying. When you sell your home to an iBuyer, that looks and feels a little bit different than selling your home traditionally. But iBuying only has 1% market share. So 99% of the time that you sell your home, it's basically like it was 15 years ago when Zillow started. You're a little less clueless as a consumer. You have a sense, for example, of what might my home sell for, which you didn't have 15 years ago. So that's good, but it still hasn't changed that much. So we got a lot of work to do as an industry.
And for the agent side too, there's a lot of work. If you're a Zillow Flex team right now, you probably have another CRM for the team, for your Google PPC or whatever else you're running as leads for the team. And maybe you're working on, any number of the different CRMs. And a lot of them do connect with the Zillow CRM. Yeah. But then if you're also on, Realtor VIP or something, that you've got to update that app. And so some of these big mega teams now have like VAs where it's like you personally update this app, instead of having the agent go and log into 4 different CRMs on top of all the other logins. Is that an area that can be solved for real estate agents where they aren't logging into 15 to 25 different platforms?
Maybe. I mean,
or is that just the world we live in?
Well, yeah. So it's sort of the world we live in. I mean, Okta is a huge public company now, OKTA, and many companies, including Zillow, employees use Okta to log into all their stuff. So if real estate agents tend to work for themselves, but if you work at a big company like a Pacaso or a Zillow, you'll use Okta and you'll have the login to your payroll thing and the login to your healthcare thing and the login to your, employee benefits thing. And I mean, at Zillow, their employees at Zillow probably have 50 logins at Okta to different services that they use. So to some extent, I think that's kind of the way of the world. Just like as a consumer now, you've got so many different services that you touch, but these things will be stitched together a little bit better. There's certainly ample opportunity for a CRM, for example, to connect to a digital appraisal service like a Loft, where I'm an investor, or a digital mortgage origination service like Tomo, where I'm an investor. Your CRM, your real estate CRM, regardless of what you choose, should integrate better with each of those things. And it should also integrate better up funnel with lead sources like Realtor.com or Zillow. And so there's definitely still piping to be built in the real estate industry that improves the connectivity of the software suite.
On both sides. We talked about it with the consumers and what they're dealing with the transaction, and also on the agent side, that last half or that last maybe third, I guess, of the transaction where it's the appraisals and the title. And there's a whole bunch of believers that, the blockchain can just solve all of that. Are we a long way away from, if we're not haven't solved the middle entirely, are we a long way away from solving the end of the transaction? Which if we haven't solved it means agents, guess what? There's a lot of need for real estate professionals.
Well, even once title is digitized and on the blockchain somehow, I don't think that will take away anything from real estate professionals. That'll be like, it's like if you're a doctor, like a radiologist, and now there's an X-ray machine. It's like, well, that's great. That makes my job much easier, and it allows me to focus my work, my time and effort on higher value things. Like even if an AI can read an X-ray, for example, and tell me as the radiologist what it says, that too would be really valuable, because then I'm able to spend more time showing empathy and counseling my client, my patient, or my real estate client on what it all means. Just this morning I had was probably my 25th pitch of a startup that's trying to do some form of digitizing or putting on the blockchain title. So there are a lot of entrepreneurs trying to figure this out. I'm generally pretty skeptical that it can be pulled off on a reasonable time frame, because you'll need county adoption, because there's huge regulatory challenges to overcome. I think it's a 20-year slog to really do something interesting on title on the blockchain. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I think it's going to take a long time.
And if you live in small town America, that makes a lot of sense to you if you know your town hall or your county hall and how they operate. So that's a long way away. What's the big problem that Zillow is going to solve over the short term? Right now, what is Zillow going to solve?
Well, so firstly, on the title point, it's interesting that there are a couple countries that are trying to pave the way. Because I think El Salvador and Latvia, Estonia, a couple countries that have centralized national title programs. They're trying to, I think that's where we'll start seeing it working first before we start seeing it in the US, because we have such a decentralized system. Problem Zillow is solving. Well, I should preface this by saying I'm not affiliated with Zillow anymore at all.
Correct.
So I'm a shareholder of Zillow.
This will be more of a prediction for you. We won't hold you to it. But
Zillow in the post iBuying era of Zillow, which we're just now entering, they're focused on maximizing lead conversion and driving take rate from the leads that they connect with real estate professionals. So those are like priorities number 1 and number 2, and then priority number 3 is driving more attached services from mortgage and title and escrow from attached to the leads that they send to Premier agents. So those are the priorities for Zillow, they're right sizing the company and reducing the size of the company now that they've exited iBuying to a much smaller footprint in terms of employees to go after those priorities.
Spencer Rascoff, former CEO of Zillow. If you were the current CEO of Zillow, would you start buying brokerages in the next 10 years?
No, I wouldn't. I don't think they need to. They don't need to buy brokerages. They already are,
they already have a bigger margin.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, they're a virtual brokerage with Premier Agent, and they get to cream skim their split, if you will. They don't call it that, but it's basically what it is, without actually operating a brokerage. So for the same reason that Google isn't likely to start operating hotels, or Expedia is not likely
to buy all the plumbing companies in the country.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. Google doesn't need to operate their own plumbers. They instead have all the plumbers compete and buy leads from Google, and they cream skim.
Google Local Services is kind of a direct competitor in the real estate to Zillow Premier Agent.
Absolutely. And I think, the reason that Zillow is somewhat protected vis-a-vis Google is because they have built plumbing around lead conversion. And
they are when people say I'm looking at a house, I'm going to Zillow it. If I'm going to research something, I'm going to Google it.
They have more top of funnel traffic, which protects their, they're not as dependent on Google for traffic as, say,
the beginning.
Angie's List is, dependent on Google for home services traffic. But Google drives traffic to an agent's website, which generally converts a visitor to a lead very poorly. Zillow generates a lead that goes into an app for the agent and also integrates with the CRM, so that lead should convert at a higher rate. So Zillow has a much better value proposition to an advertising real estate agent than Google does. And if you look at other categories, for example, it's not quite as clear cut. Google's value prop to an advertiser in some other verticals outside of real estate is pretty, like doctors, for example. If you're or a lawyer, if you're a lawyer and you want to grow your business, you can buy traffic from Google to your website and generate new business. There's no Zillow of medicine, or of healthcare, or of lawyers that generates not just a lead, but actually a lead that can be converted and goes into a CRM. So Zillow is pretty protected vis-a-vis Google. I
agree that most of the teams, websites, even small brokerages, they're certainly not converting like the Zillow app, which is now going to be the super app. I don't know if that's the same app or different.
I don't know what that really means.
But the Zillow app obviously converts at a higher level than an agent's website. Yeah. So take your $100 million team. Should they still have their own website?
Yes, they should.
Okay.
And I am an investor in one. So I'm an investor and advisor to Luxury Presence, which does high-end real estate agent websites. And real estate agents absolutely should have their own website as well. They need to own and control their own digital presence, their own digital brand. It's how most consumers, even if they find you on Zillow, they're going to then go Google you and end up on your website. But most clients aren't even going to find you on Zillow. They're mostly going to find you through word of mouth, sphere of influence, from yard signs,
or meeting you through the Zillow connection.
Exactly. So either way, you absolutely need a great website. Luxury Presence has what I view as great websites for agents, and also a referral network for other agents that are members of Luxury Presence. So, yeah.
All right, last Zillow question. It's the Broke Agent Media launch week, and the creator of the Broke Agent, Eric, he's outside. So I've got to ask you this. When he was posting any Zestimate jokes on the Broke Agent Instagram, or any similar jokes like that were out there, did anybody like run into your office when you were the CEO? Like, Spencer, you got to see this. Should we blast this guy off of planet Earth here? Has anything ever been brought to you that was controversial or just in a joking manner?
Yeah, I mean, lots of things. And I think one of the magical things about Zillow and the brand, the reason that it is Zillow and not Realtor.com, or one of the many reasons, is that we leaned into that frivolity, that voyeurism in the brand. That, we didn't run away from real estate porn. Like, it would be very easy for a company to say like, oh, we can't have the word porn, associated with our brand. But far from shutting down others when they described it that way, we stoked that flame. And I think that was very, very clever. So, that SNL skit that
I was just going to bring up the SNL skit. I mean, was that planned?
No, it wasn't. No, so that was a total. So to be clear,
plan.
I wasn't at Zillow anymore when it came out, but it was a total surprise to Zillow. Zillow didn't even know about it, and they certainly didn't pay for it. But even though it was totally organic and a surprise, it didn't surprise me at all, and it was 15 years in the making. And
it was so true.
Yeah, and I mean, it was 15 years in the making because we did so many things, big and small, to feed into that meme. And support it. And you see this all over, on TikTok now, for example. There are organic accounts not controlled by Zillow that are people that are like making fun of Zillow listings or doing spooky ghost houses of Zillow or other making fun of property descriptions or weird photos. Like, the fact that that's happening out there in the world, think about that for a second. These are the same listings. They're in IDX, right? So you could have a meme account on Instagram on homes.com, but nobody does that.
No,
right? They do it on Zillow. It's the same photos.
They don't even do it on Realtor.com.
Right. So like, why is that? And it's again, it's not an accident. It's many years of things that you didn't even really see of us at Zillow and the incredible marketing team, when I was there, of laying the groundwork for that.
Well, 2 out of 3 people just go to that app over any other app. That's including all the brokerages, all the other big competitors. It's because of that brand.
Yeah.
It's got a stronghold on it.
For sure.
No regrets at Zillow.
None.
All right, good. Let's go over to Pacaso.
Okay.
Because, I mean, the fastest company in the world? Would that be the world?
So
Planet
far,
Earth?
I mean, yes. So we were the fastest company to reach unicorn status. Our Series B was at about $1 billion plus valuation. I'm kind of blushing because it's a weird thing we went back and forth on whether we should have even announced it at the time, because it is a little arrogant almost, but it was true and we verified it.
It's a GOAT record. It's all-time GOAT status.
Yeah.
The fastest, the first ever, to do that.
I mean, it's a testament to the strength of the team and also the idea and the timing, right? I mean, so Pacaso lets you buy a portion of a second home, and the insight here that my co-founder, Austin Allison.
Loop, right?
Yeah. I mean, Austin was the founder of Loop, which is real estate transaction management software. And I stalked, as the CEO of Zillow, I stalked him for probably 5 years trying to get him to sell it to us. And, every conference.
What does that look like?
I've done that a lot, or I did that a lot at Zillow. So what it looks like was, I'd call him every month or two, and I literally had a calendar reminder.
You'd follow up.
Yeah, a calendar reminder. Street Easy is the classic example of this, where I called Michael Smith, the founder of Street Easy, I think every month for 2 years, and said,
give us the script.
Are you ready to sell? Are you ready to sell? Hey, Michael, it's Spencer here from Zillow. Hope you're doing great. How you been? How's biz? Is now the right time? And then eventually
just going for the kill every other month.
I don't think of this a kill, going for the hug. And one time the answer was yes. And Matt Corgan and Doug Pope at HotPads, same thing. I'd call them. I always wanted to own the HotPads brand as a separate standalone rentals website. We always wanted to own Street Easy. We always wanted to own Loop and transaction management. And Pete Flint at Trulia, Pete and I had that same conversation probably, at least once a quarter for 5 years before it was the right time for us to merge. So I stalked Loop for many, many years. Zillow acquired it. Austin and about 200 employees came over from Loop over to Zillow. He stayed for 4 years. at Zillow. So he was a senior executive at Zillow. We worked very closely together. He ran a lot of our real estate software businesses. So the real estate productivity software that we sold or gave to real estate agents, that was all Austin at Zillow. And so he was there for 4 years. When we both left about 3 years ago, we left at the same time, and we immediately, like that week, started working on business ideas together because I thought he was such a talented founder. I saw what he created at Dotloop, and I really wanted to work with him again. And so we started, like any good startup brainstorming exercise, you start by talking about each other and yourselves. And I mean, we're literally.
Did you guys go away somewhere for this?
This was weirdly, it was mostly by phone. And I would just go for a walk on the beach with my cell phone, and he was up in Napa Valley on his cell phone, and we would just spend hours. We did do some things in person, but we knew each other well enough that it was mostly just by phone, not even on Zoom. And it's like a get to know you conversation of like, tell me about your life, like what's important to you, what do you like, what problems do you see around you? And I think that's the best way to ideate around a business plan. Even the way Zillow started was the same thing. The co-founders were all together in a room trying to think of startup ideas, and we were buying houses at around the same time. Yeah. And we're using all these websites, and we're like, these websites stink. King County's website, which is where Seattle is, King County's website is pretty good, actually. What if there were some of this county data like publicly available, and the MLS has lots of great data? What if there was like a mashup of county, MLS data and then evaluation on every home, on every rooftop? And that's how we created Zillow out of personal need. Anyway, so Austin and I were.
By the way, I heard Rich tell the story of how you guys came up with the name Zillow. That's a whole fascinating story too.
Zillions of pillows, or what did he say?
Well, he was going with all these. He wrote all these words. Maybe it was fabricated or whatever, but all these words were on the board, and you're taking all these words, and you had to have a Z in it, and all these.
True.
All these different.
All true. I'm actually teaching I teach a class at Harvard called Startups from Idea to Exit, and my class next week is on naming, and so it's exactly about this topic: how do you name a startup? So Austin and I, we both loved second homes. I was fortunate enough to have a second home. He was fortunate enough to have a second home, and they changed our lives. Like when you have a second home, you can be a better version of yourself. You're a better parent. You're a better friend. You're a better kid there. And you don't only have a second home, you really have a second life, a second set of rituals, a place where your kids like to go to breakfast, a hike that you go on, friends and neighbors that you make in that second community. And yet it's really inaccessible to most people. Most people can't afford a second home. Many can hardly afford a first home. And so the reason for that is because it's very expensive to own a second home because of underutilization.
Yeah.
And most second homes are only used 6 weeks a year. Why is 6 weeks relevant? Well, that's 1/8 of a home. And so we hit upon the idea of co-ownership, which is what Pacaso allows you to do. It allows you to co-own your home. You can buy a home in 1/8, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8 of the home, and then you co-own it with other people. Anyway, so that's how Austin and I came up with the idea, and to where we started the conversation about unicorn status. It's an idea that really has perfect product market fit, because in a world where you don't need to be tethered to your office anymore, people have many people, especially knowledge workers, have more ability to use a second home than ever before. And so that's increased interest in second home ownership, which has benefited Pacaso greatly. Do
you feel like you're back at the beginning stages of building Zillow, where you're getting resistance around this new way of home ownership in Pacaso?
Yes. Yes. It's similar to Hotwire, my first startup, when the tagline for Hotwire was a 4-star hotel at a 2-star price. And Hotwire created with Priceline this new category of travel purchasing where you got a great discount, but you didn't know particulars about the travel product. You didn't know the airline until you bought the ticket. You didn't know the name of the hotel until you bought the hotel room. You didn't know the departure time on the airline ticket. And so we were creating a new category of travel that was much cheaper and therefore more accessible to more people, but had some restrictions. That's pretty similar to what we're doing at Pacaso, right? We're creating a new category of home ownership that has some restrictions. You can't use the house whenever you want because you only own 1/8 of it, but it's much more financially accessible to people. There was absolutely resistance at Hotwire. There was resistance at Zillow. There is some resistance at Pacaso.
Does that make you believe this is the right thing to do?
Yeah,
that resistance
it does.
Validates?
It does, absolutely. I mean, that almost no great innovation has not had resistance. I mean, every great innovation has had resistance of some kind or another. The resistance in the case of Pacaso is a little bit strange to me, because I firmly believe that Pacaso is good for communities, that the problem is empty second homes. If you live in one of these communities, the problem is that the restaurants are empty on Wednesdays, and that, they're all these second homes sit vacant. And so the money is not coming into the community, and it does drive up house prices when out of towners buy these second homes.
Yeah.
What Pacaso does is it's like carpooling. Like carpooling combines people into a single car, and that reduces congestion on the freeway. Pacaso carpools people into a single home that's higher end, and so it alleviates demand in the mid tier by aggregating 8 people into the upper price tier. And then those homes are utilized, and so local services and restaurants and bars and wineries and ski mountains and other services are used because the homes are highly utilized as compared with sitting empty. So we think it's patently good for the community. Now, we have a little work to do to articulate that position and to convince some resistors, but I think it's good for these areas.
Well, I have a second home in Connecticut, and in the winter, it's a ghost town.
Right.
And I was just up there for a couple of days, and the restaurants.
Right.
I went to my favorite restaurant, and I'm like, man, you guys would be open till 10:30 if this was the summer when everybody's here.
So who does that help? I mean, your house sits empty. It's not good for anybody. And you should turn your home into a Pacaso, which we do. It's called a sell down. And, you would contact Pacaso, and we would check out your house. And then if we thought it would make a good Pacaso and we had demand, we haven't actually launched in Connecticut yet, but we've done this a lot in Tahoe and Napa and Malibu and other markets.
So you're launching market by market?
Yeah, we're in 35 markets around the world right now. We're in the US, the UK, and Spain, and in 35 cities.
And is there a certain price point? I think it was 4 to 8 million is what I was reading.
Yeah, the typical price point is at least 2 times the median home value. Yeah. So our typical home's whole home value is around 4 to 8 million. So you divide that by 8 to get your unit value. So $500,000 to $1 million is what most people are paying for their Pacaso, or 1/8 of the home. Wow. Now, over time, we'll move into more approachable price points in more approachable markets. Like the vision for Pacaso is to be in your town in Connecticut. It's to be on a lake in Ohio and in Texas, and
going all the way to the median price point.
Probably not down. We'll still be luxury. We'll be luxury in those markets, but
and luxury is defined differently in every market.
Of course, and but it typically like 2 times the median home value at a minimum.
4 to 8 million. How many homes do you guys have right now?
We've done hundreds, maybe even thousands by the time this airs.
Yeah, every day some more.
Yes.
Some issues happening in St. Helena, Napa area, and just resistance that is very specific to laws that they're trying to enforce in the town. Do you want to touch on that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a moving target, so it's hard to comment too specifically. I'd say, there are 1 or 2 communities. We're in 35 markets, and there are 1 or 2 where we've had pushback. And that pushback, in the case that you're talking about, there's been a local ordinance passed, which we think is unconstitutional because it's a constitutional right to be able to buy real estate in an LLC with other people, and the government shouldn't be able to regulate. They shouldn't be able to tell me that I can't buy a home with you any more or less than that I buy a home that I with somebody from Pacaso. And it's also a very slippery slope on property rights because many of these communities have long histories of redlining and of trying to keep out people that don't look like them. And
Newsweek can tell you about that.
Yeah, exactly. It gets pretty hairy because again, some of this pushback is motivated by a outsider bias, like a feeling that our community looks in a particular way. Wink, wink. I think we all know what that means. Mm-hmm. We don't want other folks to come in and buy here.
In the law specifically, and you guys can read about it, but they're banning timeshares, and you talk about the timeshare.
Yeah, we're not a timeshare.
It's not a timeshare.
We're not a timeshare. We're co-ownership in an LLC. So,
real ownership.
Yeah, real ownership. And this is the irony, of course, is in a lot of these communities, around half of all the homes are owned in an LLC, a multi-member LLC.
Of course.
And it could be parent-child, it could be 2 spouses, it could be 2 friends. So this is we did not invent this. Pacaso did not invent the category of co-ownership. And it certainly didn't invent the category of owning real estate in an LLC. Those two things are very, widely distributed. We're a process to do those two things. But so I think, we take a very long-term point of view. I think over the very long term, people will understand that this is good for communities, and the resistance that we've encountered in just one or two places, I think over time will work itself out.
People might think you've invented every real estate company
No,
out there.
Not. But I definitely have not. I mean, that's one thing I have learned as an investor is there are almost no new ideas. There are really just packaging of old ideas. But
I agree with that.
The comparable with, or the comp, as you would say in real estate, with Pacaso is really Airbnb. So in Airbnb, Airbnb didn't invent the idea of renting out your place for a short period of time, and or even your spare room, right? But what Airbnb did was they came along and they solved trust and safety, demand aggregation, payments, scheduling. They sort of solved all these things that have unlocked this huge market. What
made it way more possible.
Exactly, made it way more possible. And what Pacaso has done is we've taken something that is a DIY, a do-it-yourself thing. Like families buy a mountain house together or ski house together, or whatever, all the time. But it's very hard to do that. It usually ends friendships when you do it yourself. Yeah. Why? Because scheduling is very difficult. Demand aggregation is very difficult. How do you get to enough people that want 100% of the home? Governance is very difficult. How do you decide how the home gets furnished or what CapEx goes in? Bill pay is difficult. And mortgage finance is impossible. You can't, call Rocket Mortgage and say, hey, I want a mortgage on a quarter of a home. They won't originate it, but you can get a mortgage through Pacaso. And then finally, liquidity is impossible. If you buy a home with 3 friends, good luck getting out. What happens if you want to sell? You can't list that, right?
8 owners, just the emails going around about the electric bill would drive me insane.
So this is what Pacaso solves, right? So you do the scheduling to visit your home through the Pacaso app. We do all the governance. We do all the property management. We do the demand aggregation to get to 100%. We do the mortgage finance, and we do the resale. So when you want to sell your home, you just list it through Pacaso. The other owners have right of first refusal, and then it gets listed in the MLS. It appears on regular IDX websites. And so we have liquidity. So it's very different from a timeshare, which is multifamily, not single family. There's no liquidity. They go out
of business, you lose it.
Exactly. You don't really own real property. With timeshare, you basically own the right to stay at a hotel at a discounted, or really the obligation to stay at the hotel at a discounted price. In the case of Pacaso, it's an asset, not a liability. You actually own the LLC interest in that real property.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. It's why it's a unicorn. So congrats. I love what you said, that there's no real new ideas. These great entrepreneurs are packaging, an idea or making it a lot better or more accessible or whatever. What are the great entrepreneurs how can you be a great entrepreneur even in the real estate space over the next 5-10 years?
Solve a problem, find a problem in your life and try to solve it. And, the difference between a tinkerer and a great entrepreneur is somebody who finds a big problem to solve. Mm-hmm. Because one of the most common things that I find as an angel investor who has seen, my team and I see about 500 pitches a year. So, we have a lot of reps.
You personally look at them all?
I personally see about 250 a year.
It's like one a day.
Yeah, it feels like 5 a day.
Take the weekends out, it's one a day.
Yeah, it's a lot. So we see a lot of pitches. A lot of them are features, not companies. A lot of them are solving some small problem.
If you're an entrepreneur, how do you know the difference between a feature and a company?
It's probably gut, I guess. But a good rule of thumb is to try to back into, is there a path to 25 to 100 million of revenue? So most software companies...
25 to 100.
Yeah,
because... If you can't get there, forget about it. It's a hobby.
Or it's a feature, it can be bootstrapped, but it's not venture fundable. Mm-hmm. So there are plenty of good ideas that, are you should pursue. Just don't expect to raise money for them. You have to, it's so like, I was pitched the other day, an offer platform, like software for real estate agents to, listing agents.
All the real estate deals.
Yeah, I do see a lot of the real estate. Yeah. So, it's a good idea. It's like, hey, if I'm in a hot market, how do I manage multiple offers that come in at the same time? And, how do I create like an auction type, experience, user interface, and give transparency to the listing agent, the buyer's agents, their clients, et cetera. I don't think that's venture fundable, because if you have to separate out the total addressable market from the serviceable addressable market. So what's the serviceable addressable market of that idea? Well, it's probably pretty high-end listing agents in really hot markets what's a reasonable market penetration? Well, maybe I can get 10% of them, 25% of them to use it. What would they likely pay for it? When you do all that math, you end up with, this is probably a $10 or $20 million revenue business. The reason that it's important to get to that level is maybe these things will trade at 5 to 10 times that. So let's say it's 10 million of revenue. That means it's going to be $50 to $100 million total value. VCs, venture capitalists, are never going to invest in anything where they think the total upside for the company is $100 million in value, because they can't get compensated enough for the risk that they're taking to move the needle on that type of an exit. So, entrepreneurs listening to this are probably like, $100 million, that'd be amazing. I'd love to create a company worth $100 million. And you should, absolutely. Just, you're not going to attract investment capital for it. You're going to have to bootstrap it or do it yourself. Broke agent media is perhaps, falls into that category. It's absolutely something you guys are doing well. And
we're not taking investors right now. So
and good, because I'm not sure how fundable it is as a true standalone media company that, is it $1 billion plus opportunity? Maybe not.
What other products besides sponsors, affiliates, and our own own products like a course should BAM be looking at to be a bigger valuation company?
I mean, I'm pretty bullish on events. Like, I have a digital media business called .LA, which is a news service that just covers LA tech. It's sort of like Inman News, but for LA tech.
Is .LA a feature? Or is it?
It's a great question, and we've raised a couple $1 million of venture capital for it from the LA tech community, who wants it to succeed.
Out of passion,
to uplift the LA tech community. Yeah. Also a little bit financially, like we all hope that we're building something, but it's somewhere, it's a tweener between a feature and a company. I'm aiming to turn it into a company to drive venture type returns, but it's a small opportunity. For now, it's just focused on one city. Now you can easily imagine taking it to .Atlanta, .Miami, .Boston, et cetera. And then maybe it becomes big enough to really drive a multiple $100 million.
So events,
exit.
We should look at events if we want to go big.
I think so.
In what way? Typical conference, or
it'd be great if you had a different spin on the conference. I mean, you're all real estate agents, so you know better than I do, like what agents, where the white space is. My guess is that there's plenty of content out there for them to absorb podcasts or media like this and other conferences in person or on Zoom. So it's probably not content. Maybe it's just networking and connectivity with their peers. I don't know.
What would be another way that if you were advising a media company?
The big like divide in online media is paywall or no paywall.
Right.
So .LA, for example, has no paywall.
No paywall on BAM.
And the good news of no paywall is it's a bigger addressable market.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't have one at .LA. The bad news is it's hard to monetize. So you look at like the information, it's a pretty good business. Now it's a very small number of subscribers, but they pay a lot of money, and so it makes a bunch of money. And most digital media has moved towards paywall, and Substack has enabled that, which is a newsletter subscription platform. But I'm sort of allergic to a paywall as it depends on your goal, right? I mean, if your goal is to build a small business that's very profitable, you should probably have a paywall. If your goal is to try to have as big an impact as possible and make it broad, then you should try to avoid a paywall. But you're asking for more concrete advice.
It's easier to monetize on social than it is with a paywall if you know how to do social really well.
Yeah. I mean, when you say monetize on social, you mean like have your social footprint do paid posts for brands and stuff?
Either paid posts or, pushing a product. But a paywall, especially in like the industry that we're talking about, is a really small target market.
Right? Yes. I mean, I totally agree. I totally agree that it's difficult to monetize a paywall in a niche vertical like digital real estate. I don't really agree that it's easy. Maybe it's easier, but it's not really easy to monetize on social.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
But if you understand, a lot of the companies that have a paywall aren't doing anything on social.
Right.
So if they didn't have a paywall, they would be out of business, essentially. Right. Now, I agree with the events. Is there anything?
I mean, what you should be looking for is like any scalable, basically, again, back to where we were 5 minutes ago, solve a problem. So what's a problem? I don't know. Agents need to generate business and they don't want to just be solely reliant on Zillow for their lead volume or lead generation. Another problem, agents give up a lot of their commission to their broker and they want to keep more of their commission. Another problem for a broker is they're trying to demonstrate their value prop to their agent, and
they're trying to get their agents to use their mortgage. That's their biggest problem.
You're right.
That's
Totally.
their biggest problem.
Totally. That's a huge problem, right? So maybe we have two sets of problems on two whiteboards. On the broker side, you've got recruit and retain agents, drive attached revenue. On the agent side, it's because of RESPA, I can't monetize my mortgage business at all.
Get nothing out of it.
A problem. And then I would sort of map these different problems that different participants have. You might even have a whiteboard on MLSs. Like, what are their problems? You might have one on NAR. What are its problems? You might have one on the real estate technology companies other than Zillow. Like, what are their problems? And then you'd sort of map on top of that, what are you passionate about? Like, because like the one thing I've learned is that there's no such thing as a great founder just in and of itself. There's only a great founder for a particular idea. Mm-hmm. Like Austin Allison is a great founder for Pacaso. But if I told him to go, hey, go do this other startup thing, even within real estate, even if it was like, go start a real estate agent CRM, he wouldn't be the right founder for that. He's just not passionate about that. He wouldn't be great at it. He wouldn't be the best in the world at it. He's the best in the world to pursue the current Pacaso mission. So like once you've got all these problems, then map like, well, which of these problems are you passionate about solving?
When you're going through that whiteboard process, I can visualize it in my head one way, but how do you actually do it? You're writing all these problems, you're listing them out on the 5, 6, whatever categories. Then what?
Then you want to size them. So, let's say the MLS whiteboard is a problem that MLSs have is, keeping their members happy. It's like, okay, well, let's size that problem. Well, how many MLSs are there? Like basically which of these problems deserve a circle around them based on size, and then which of them, a green circle, and which of them deserve a black circle based on your passion for the problem, and then which ones have 2 circles around them.
And then focus on how many?
5 to 10, and then try to ideate and get them a little further down the road, and eventually get to 1.
Yeah. What about NAR? Is that a problem? And outside of the lobbying they do, is there great value for brokerages and agents?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually thought very much about that question, so this is kind of real time. NAR's a very successful trade association. They have
the largest.
I think the first or second largest budget overall, bigger than the NRA, bigger than AARP. And they're pretty darn good at what they do, which is they collect dues from their members and they turn around and they give those dues for influence to advance the industry. And, the industry has a lot to thank NAR for, everything from the mortgage interest deduction to, I don't know, the creation or the cultivation of the MLSs or whatever. Like
even investors that 1031 was floating around going away, and they step in and they help out with that.
That's right. But they've got their own list of problems. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but I would guess it's demonstrating value to their members. Number 2 is probably maintaining the power of the brand Realtor, which every day becomes a little bit more generic, genericized. Most consumers have no idea what a realtor is and why it's different from a real estate agent, from a real estate broker. So I think that's a pretty big problem for NAR. Another problem is just its own bowl of spaghetti governance, where it's like there's the national and the local and the regional. It's like all kind of convoluted and complex. I mean, those are some problems that I think NAR probably faces. I would guess. But I haven't ever really dug in there deeply.
Did you have any communication with NAR?
Yeah. I mean, it was mostly when I was CEO of Zillow, we communicated a lot, and I built friendship. I mean, Todd Carpenter, that's at Second Century Ventures, is I think terrific, and he's I consider him a pretty good friend. And I would talk to Dale Stinton and kind of the leadership pretty regularly.
Did they ever ask you, Spencer, slow down or change course?
Less than you'd think. Yeah. I mean, I felt like, I can't speak to what it's like today, but I felt like I had a pretty constructive relationship with NAR, even though we didn't agree on a lot of things. There were plenty of times where we disagreed. I always took the strategy when I was at Zillow of maximum engagement. It's like if somebody's out there on social media saying, talking smack about Zillow or about me, engage, go meet people where they're at, attend the conferences, go meet people at the NAR offices in Chicago. That was my attitude. It took a lot of time and effort, and it took a lot out of me, like physically and mentally. But I think that's the right strategy. That's the strategy we're choosing at Pacaso as well, is one of engagement with any opposition. So we talked with NAR a lot, even though we weren't always on the same side of the table as things.
So wrap this up, and again, just really appreciate it. Such a big impact you've made on this industry. If you're a real estate professional, a mortgage professional who's just maybe not paying attention to all these moving parts, but you're trying to figure it out and be better, what's your advice to them to be really relevant over the next 5 years?
I think that the immutable thing is the democratization of access to information and the consumerization of everything. So meaning that you can't hold back this tide, this, like, the dam has burst of access to information for consumers, and basically don't bet against the consumer. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You can't go back to some other era. If it's better for the consumer, for X startup to win, or for Y regulation to pass, or for Z innovation to occur, it will occur. Like the consumer has won relative to all other interests, the government, the real estate professional, the trade association, whatever. Consumer first. That's that's what's going to win.
How much information does the average consumer want on, agents are so wrapped up in real estate, but how much does the average homeowner want to know about their home?
I mean, it depends. I think, Zillow's traffic would have you believe that people care a lot about home values, and that there are a lot of nosy neighbors out there.
Yeah.
What's never worked, and I've seen a million pitches on this, is the folder, kind of digitizing the folder. When you buy a house and the seller gives you the manila folder with this is all the warranties and all the this is how the side gate works, and this is, the guy that fixed the outdoor lighting one time, and all that crap that's in the folder. There's a lot of business plans around helping the homeowner digitize the folder. So far, homeowners have not been interested in that, even though you think that it's a big problem. That should be on the whiteboard. By the way, there should be a whiteboard of problems for consumers as well. I don't think we talked a lot about professional problems, but consumer problems deserves 3 whiteboards. Anyway, that's a huge problem. Nobody's really solved it. Consumers haven't seemed interested in solving it, even though you'd think they would be.
They're more interested in just give me the stuff, or I'll figure it out on my own.
Yeah, this is another good rubric for thinking about startups is 10x. Something has to improve the process, be 10x better than the prior thing. So of course it would be great for some digital folder for me to track all this stuff around my house. But if it's not 10 times better than my status quo, I'm not going to bother, because people are lazy and busy. So
the biggest problem with moving is obviously the move itself, but all of those different addresses. It's you almost don't even want to move, because I got 15 things coming into this one address. I got to go contact 15 different companies and get all this mail now situated, and you still got to go into the old address, and you're talking to the USPS.
That's a problem. Totally.
It's definitely a problem. Yeah. All right. Well, Spencer, you got a lot of problems. You're solving a whole bunch of them. So we're going to leave it there. Again, really appreciative of you spending the time with us.
Thank you very much. It's been great speaking with you. Thank you.